Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 716, Phase Through. Piloting the drone was essentially the same as putting his own soul into it, meaning he could use spells and techniques that he could normally do with his own body. And of course, this was the same for abilities. It was theoretically fine, but he hadn't tested it out yet to know if it works. Now was as good a time as any to try. Master, can I borrow this thing some other time? It's so cool that you can see everything from inside, Fudge said, as he jumped from wall to wall looking at the displays showcasing the outside world. Nope, Michael quickly replied. Aside from the fact that it was a bad idea, it was also unfeasible. No one could control this drone aside from him. Fudge can have his own private pocket dimension in his mini drone cape as long as you purchase the inhabitation upgrade in the store, ChatJK5 reminded him. Without further ado, Michael piloted the drone to move closer to the black walls of the Gothic castle. His plan was simple. First, use the quantum step to bypass the thick castle walls lined with ability power way too strong for him to break through. Then, once he was out, he would use the phase-through ability of the drone to navigate through the underground rock that surrounded castle walls. Here goes. Quantum step. He visualized gathering enormous amounts of ability power in his hands, and suddenly, threads began to unravel out of the batteries at the bottom of the drone's frame and slowly flowed towards the front two propellers. The very fabric of space began bending, folding in upon itself as the propellers gained more and more ability power. It was working. It wasn't long before the technique reached its apex. And to push it to its final phase, Michael tapped into his own Godforge pieces and added the last bit of ability power needed to execute the quantum step. Suddenly, the drone folded into itself, disappearing into a singularity in an instant. Then, it reappeared on the other side of the wall, completely bypassing the defensive perimeter that only those above the nascent spirit realm could break. Immediately, Michael, Fudge, and Kuno saw nothing but darkness around the drone. They were smack dab in the middle of a stony layer hundreds of feet underground. Thankfully, Michael anticipated that this would happen, so he had immediately activated the drone's new ability. Its individual atoms began expanding, becoming less and less dense, allowing it to pass through solid objects without a problem. They were finally out. Finally, Michael heaved a sigh of relief. Once he was outside the Gothic castle, he could finally feel connected to the mana in his surroundings. He could finally connect to the magic he left behind in the nation of Reborn, in Angora City, in Metropolis, and in the Red Ravine. Felt like he could finally breathe again. "Let's get out of here," he said before activating his shadow teleportation skill. Extremely large amounts of mana began gathering towards the drone in order to have enough mana to complete the spell. Whoa. That's a lot, he realized. Where did we end up? Even after a few seconds of the drone gobbling up all the mana in its surrounding, it still wasn't enough to complete the teleportation. There was so much mana being consumed that the ground itself was starting to shake equivalent to that of a magnitude 8 earthquake. He was starting to worry whether he should even continue the skill. Such a large disturbance in the natural mana in the environment would definitely create some problems. Thankfully though, there weren't any life forms anywhere near them, or else they could have probably gotten negatively affected by the spell. Finally, a shadow began to envelop the whole drone, creating a bubble that covered everything in darkness. Then, a few seconds later, the shadow subsided back into the ground. As soon as it did, they found themselves in a completely different environment, one that didn't surround them in hundreds of feet of solid rock. The drone was currently hovering above a cliff, leading up to a dark abyss. And on the cliff he saw the Dragonborns. He was relieved. He had teleported directly to the clone he left in their shadows to make sure that they were okay. And judging from the carefree expression of Zion, and the constant yawning of Jakku, then it was safe to say that they weren't in real trouble. He got out of the drone and slowly floated down towards the cliff. And as he did so, he was surprised to see that they were talking to elves. He had never seen an elf before, but those long-tipped ears, leafy clothes, and tall and lanky bodies couldn't be mistaken for any other race. "Who is Michael?" asked one of the middle-aged female elves talking to Shiina. Shiina looked really excited that she was given the opportunity to gush about their Lord Michael. "Lord Michael is," and just as she was about to continue her sentence, She suddenly whipped her head upwards and finally noticed the man floating down towards them. A look of relief, happiness, and tons of other emotions welled up in her face. "Lord Michael," she said, immediately kneeling down. The other Dragonborns finally noticed him as well and greeted him in their own ways. "Bro Mike, where'd you been?" Zion said, casually waving at Michael as if he'd just only come back from vacation. "Boss sup?" Jaku said, nodding. "Boss Michael, happy he?" Omisu muttered shyly, with her cheeks blushing. Finally, the elves took notice of the golden-haired boy coming down towards them. "Michael," Farron said, getting a good look at him. And immediately, she was surprised at his youth. She expected the Lord Michael that Shiina had been loyal to be some kind of powerful human the likes of Alaric or the other legacies in Metropolis. But it looked like he was just some ordinary kid. "Hey guys, glad you're all right," he said, landing on the ground softly. Shiina was about to approach him, but Zion got there first. "You gotta listen, bro Mike. We went through this weird space tunnel and then, Zion began to narrate their troubles in the space rift, and how Shiina was the one who saved them from getting lost in the chaos forever. "They were caught in the aftermath of my abduction. But it's good that they got out." And of course, Zion also told Michael about the Mockingjay, Shiina's troubles with the bow, and the appearance of the creatures called Zephyrs. Sis probably didn't wash her eyes this morning. That's why she couldn't hit anything. But in the end, she was able to do it. And get this, she awakened her diva. Shiina immediately smacked him on the head. "Hey, I wanted to tell him that." "Zephyrs? What's that?" Zephyrs are the natural adversaries of the elves. They reside in the deep forests of the Elven Kingdom and ChatJK5 gave him a brief description of Zephyrs. "They're native to the Elven Kingdom? I see. They also got caught up in the space rift and somehow ended up here. Wait, was the Gothic castle located in the Elven Kingdom?" Chapter 717. Talking with the Elves. Chapter 717. Talking with the Elves. If the Zephyrs were caught up in the space rift because of his transportation to the Gothic castle, then it was safe to assume that it had to be located somewhere near where the Zephyrs lived. And according to the elves, they only lived in the Elven Kingdom. It would also explain why his shadow teleportation skill required an enormous amount of mana. He had to travel through to another continent. If that is true, then this is good if I ever want to visit the Elven Kingdom. Now that I've been there once, I can always go back. It would just take an enormous amount of mana to do so. It is incredibly fortunate and unfortunate that the Zephyrs appeared here out of all places, Farron said. "I haven't introduced myself. I am Lady Farron, and we of the Elven race greet you, Michael of the humans." The elves put their right hand on their chests and bowed. "Fortunate?" he asked. "Why do you say that? We do not know how these Zephyrs appeared here, but we do know why. Mother Nature herself sent those Zephyrs to let us know and discover a generational talent none of us had yet seen in our lifetimes. The venerable Shiina." Farron and the elves showed great honor and admiration as they looked at Shiina. "I feel like I'm missing something here," he muttered. "Shiina? Care to explain?" Shiina bowed and told him of the fight that happened between the Zephyrs. She told about how she awakened her ability power and killed the Zephyrs one by one. "That's amazing, Shiina," he complimented her. "I knew that you'd break through when you needed it." Ahem. "It's nothing special, Master," Shiina said, trying to resist smiling from ear to ear. "It is special," Farron insisted. "She is not of the Elven race, yet she can kill Zephyrs even better than our own. Without her, this whole red ravine would just become a crater on the ground. We truly believe that she has a fate that is deeply tied to the elves. That is why we beseeched for her to accompany us back to the Elven Kingdom and become one of us." Shiina immediately assured Michael of her loyalty. "I refused, Master. There is no treasure in the world that can make me turn my back on the one who gave me everything." Then, she showed the compound bow mithril artifact to the elves. "You see this?" Farron and the elves finally got a good look at the compound bow. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. It had bending mechanisms that could turn even the simplest of draws into a powerful yet precise shot that would defeat even the best bows made in the ancient era. Yes, this bow is clearly an unknown mithril relic forged during the ancient times. It had hid itself in history, only for it to be discovered by the Chosen One. This bow was also one of the reasons why they wanted Shiina to be a part of the Elven Kingdom. They wanted to treat it as a priceless treasure, a heroic weapon befitting only to the archer chosen by the Darkwood. Shiina could undoubtedly become one of the greatest archers in the entire world. It was only natural that she would side with the elves. Saying that this bow was an ancient treasure that I found would be an insult to Michael and the hard-working dwarves who forged this with their blood, sweat, and tears, Shiina said to the elves. Farron tilted her head. "What? I did not find this in a treasure box, nor did it find me. This was forged especially for me as a benefit of being one of Lord Michael's closest aides, Shiina clarified. And as soon as the elves heard this, they immediately went into an uproar of questions. Especially made? I'm sorry, I do not understand. Dwarves? A genuine mithril artifact? Forged? Farron stared at the compound bow. It had no rust, no cracks, and no broken pieces, unlike most, if not all, of the mithril relics found preserved from the ancient era. She thought that this bow was the same. But now, Shiina was saying that it was her Lord Michael, who personally forged this weapon for her. She was telling her that the golden-haired boy in front of her was the one who forged such a treasure? It was so absurd she thought it was a joke. Not only was it a genuine mithril artifact, one with the same power and durability as the ones in the ancient era, but it was also a weapon that was precisely forged to create even more leverage than some of the best bows in existence. That can't be possible, Farron chuckled. The techniques to create a mithril artifact have been lost in time. Even the mighty dwarven race has forgotten this speciality. If it's not possible, then what about this? Zion asked, taking out his gauntlets. See, as is mine, Jaka said, unsheathing his katana for a little bit to let them see the black blade forged out of mithril. Me too, Umisu shyly muttered, holding her spear close to her chest. Farron and the elves had their jaws on the ground. The silent but ever-present power hidden on those weapons were unmistakable. They were all mithril artifacts. Lord Michael has given everything to us Dragonborns, Shiina said. He has given us a weapon, a talent, a purpose, and most importantly, he has given us a home. I will never become anything other than a Rebornian. Farron and the elves were completely speechless. They thought they could persuade Shiina if they just offered her benefits to the Elven Kingdom. But clearly, she didn't need any of it. Heck, if Farron was in the same position, she would also do the same. They could create mithril artifacts, for nature's sake. This now begs the question. Who is Michael? Farron stared at the golden-haired boy and found nothing special about him. He looked like an ordinary human. You can make mithril artifacts? She asked him. You made that bow? Yup, he replied. And that is called a compound bow. But I didn't make that string. By the way, what is that? While talking about Shina's bow, he finally noticed the presence of her new string. It looked like it was made out of dried intertwined vines. When constructing her bow, he just used a normal string that a compound bow would use. He always knew that it wouldn't be up to par compared to the frame, but he had no other choice but to use it since he had no better alternative. That is darkwood, Farron explained. It was the string that the ancient elves used for their bows. It is as durable as mithril, but as flexible as rubber. It is the best material that any ranger could dream of. Shiina demonstrated this by firing off quick shots without any arrows. And with each shot, a sharp whipping sound echoed out of the bow, showing its immense power. Upon close inspection, it seems that this darkwood material has elasticity that defies common physics. It has an efficiency that exceeds that of 100%. The force produced by the material exceeds that of the force put inside of it. Chapter 718 Compound. With stats like that, Michael considered darkwood to be in the same league as mithril. It was the perfect addition to any mithril artifact or weapon that would need any kind of elasticity that a normal mithril couldn't offer. The best example for this was the bow, whose entire power comes straight from its string. Even a compound bow made out of mithril would be useless if it had a broken string. It didn't even have to be for weapons, he realized. There are some musicians back in our nation that need better strings for their mithril equipment. I wonder, if they used darkwood for it, would their powers increase as well? His imagination went wild once again as he thought of such grand possibilities. But then, he remembered that darkwood was in the same league as mithril, which meant that it was probably incredibly rare, maybe even close to extinction like mithril. This darkwood is amazing. But you guys don't use it, he said to Farron, noticing that their bows used normal strings. Darkwood is precious. We can only grow under very specific conditions. It has to have the right amount of light, wind, soil, water, mana, and many more. Even though it only needs a month for it to grow from seedling to maturity, any slight error in its conditions would immediately result in its death. Our success rate in cultivating darkwood is close to zero. That is why we have all resorted to journeying outside of the Elven Kingdom in search for any darkwood relics left behind from the ancient times. And the Royal Continent is the best place to look for it. I was supposed to use the darkwood for my bow, but it has chosen Shiina to be its wielder. It chose to become her weapon, and I am more than willing to step away. Zion then told Michael about what happened in detail, with the darkwood flying across the abyss while the combined Zephyr was close to self-destruction. It flew towards her? That sounds familiar. The elves explained the phenomenon by saying that Mother Nature herself has chosen Shiina. But from his perspective, the more plausible explanation would be that the Darkwood flew towards her because she was a natural magnetic. It was the same thing as when Godforge pieces got attracted towards his heart. He guessed that the only basis for someone to become a natural magnetic was if they wielded unity, just like the ancient humans had. And since anyone he awakened would immediately wield 8 elements like him, then that meant that once they had Godforge pieces in their hearts, then they would also become a natural magnetic. This seemed to prove that. It seems that thanks are in order, he said to Farron. If Darkwood is that valuable, then I appreciate you for letting Shiina have it. Farron immediately shook her head. No, it is my honor to have witnessed such a once-in-a-lifetime event. Michael then bent down into his shadows and picked up a thoughtful gift he thought she'd like. Here as thanks, he said as he tossed it in her direction. No, I do not need compensation. But before Farron could even finish her sentence, she felt her own Dao heart surge with excitement. She looked down, only to see a mithril artifact compound bow in her hands. Wah! This was real mithril. Touching it with her own hands, she realized that its power was completely different from any weapon she had ever wielded before. Her ability power was surging much faster than it normally would using her own bow. Felt clear. It was the same difference between a single flowing drop of water compared to a raging river. It was light, yet she could feel the beast hidden within this weapon. You're giving this to me? Farron asked, still doubting the whole situation. But from her perspective, this wasn't a fair trade at all. He was losing far too much. This was a full mithril artifact already sculpted and forged to become a weapon. And not just any weapon, but a compound bow. There was only one other compound bow in the entire world. We have plenty more in store. Don't worry, Michael assured her. Farron was about to object, but then she realized that he wasn't playing it down in any way. He really could make his own mithril artifacts, and his nonchalance in giving one away for free was proof of that. This is an immense treasure that you have given me, Farron said, her hands going across the bow's frame. Then, she and the other elves kneeled down onto the ground and kissed the soil, giving thanks to both Michael and nature itself for this gift. Trust that this weapon will be put to good use, she said. This will be an excellent weapon for Lyra. Lady Farron, that is a good idea, said one of the elves. She deserves a superb bow like this after all she's been through. I can't wait to see the look on that girl's face when she sees this. The elves were really excited to receive the compound bow, treating it as a national treasure of some kind. Michael didn't have the heart to tell them that all archers in the nation of Reborn had the same compound bow. Thank you, Michael of the humans. We will never forget this favor, they all declared. I know it's not much, but I would like to give you a small token of our appreciation, Farron said, giving Michael a small bag. As soon as he heard that satisfying clacking sound from the bag, he already knew what it was. Those were sand dollars. He quickly opened the bag and counted it to be 20,000 sand dollars. Thanks, he said. Farron nodded. For now, we must go and seek out more Darkwood hidden in ruins, but we will be in Metropolis after a month for the parade. If you would like to ask for our help, then all you need is ask and we shall offer up our bows at the ready. Shiina then stepped forward. If you'd really like to help Lord Michael, then you can visit our store in Metropolis and check out our goods. Then we shall do so. The elves then took out an arrow from their quiver and offered them on the ground. This was a custom in elven culture as a way of saying good luck. Giving someone your own arrows symbolizes your desire for them to be safe, even at the cost of their own safety. After that, they left the cave, leaving Michael and the Dragonborns alone. Lord Michael, Shiina said, approaching him. Now that I have awakened my ability, will I also be given the same mini drone the same as Fudge? She manifested her diva, showing the white dragon above her head. The cute little draconic diva purred cutely as it saw Michael. A white dragon, Michael muttered. You should name her Artie. As soon as he said that, the white dragon perked up and spread its wings in pride. Seemed to like the name. Artie, Shiina muttered. That fits. Since Shina's talent was the SS-class all-seeing artillery, then it was only appropriate to give it a name related to it. Chapter 719. Invited in. Once we get home, I'll give you the mini drone, he said. It would be a good idea to purchase the mini drone link for Shiina so that her weapon could be upgraded in the future. And thankfully, with 20,000 more sand dollars in his inventory, he had more than enough to purchase another mini drone for Shiina to use. Great! Shiina cheered. Ah, I wanted one too, Zion complained. Where's your diva? I don't see it, Shiina said, teasing him. The two once again bickered non-stop. Just then, they heard the sound of the tunnel starting to open up. A couple of seconds later, they saw a violet slime pop out of the rift, with a stone knight by his side. Yahoo! I'm back! Fudge exclaimed. Where'd you been? Michael asked. Somehow, Fudge slipped away when he wasn't paying attention. He thought he'd be able to keep the little guy from creating chaos by having him trapped inside the drone's pocket dimension. But it seemed that it was useless. I was trying to find Grieve 2.0, Fudge said as the Stone Knight picked up Fudge and put him on top of its head. But look at what I found, Master. Fudge then used his shadow and revealed 4 boxes that looked like they were made out of stainless steel. Michael's eyes widened in recognition. Is that? Yep, Master. I found them while I was going around the Red Ravine rooms, searching for 2.0. He picked up one of the boxes and twisted its top. Upon doing so, it's folded up and revealed the flaming object inside. It was a Godforge piece. He picked up another box and checked its contents. And it was indeed another piece of a floating liquid surrounded by white flames. Somehow, Fudge got 4 different boxes filled with Godforge pieces. Opening up all the boxes, ChatJK5 estimated the total to be about 10 kilograms in total. And with the 5 kilograms he found back in the first room they went through, then he would have 15 kilograms in total. That would definitely be enough for him to finally transcend to the 5th stage of body formation. Where did you find all of this? He asked Fudge. Hee. Are you proud of me, Master? There's a lot of room that becomes in disarray after the chaos of the rift in space. And I found that some of the treasure boxes were also caught up in the flow. So all I had to do was scour the entire Red Ravine and pick them up. He didn't think he'd be this grateful for Fudge being so nosy. But in this case, it was an absolute win. Was there any more? He asked. Fudge shook his head. No, Master. Because of the chaos in space, the entire Red Ravine has become unstable. Almost all the companies have already left the place, including the major factions in Metropolis. It seemed that by Kuno summoning him created a lot more chaos than he could have ever imagined. But if his guess was right and that he was forcefully transported to the Elven Kingdom, then it would make sense why there was so much chaos that happened. I guess it's time to go home, he said. Yes, finally. Jaka cheered. Michael transported everyone back to the nation of Reborn to regroup. Once they landed on the Rebornian mansion's courtyard, Shiina immediately clapped her hands and rallied her siblings. Okay, it's time for practice. What? Zion shouted. We just got home. Nope. I want to sleep, Jaka said, already sleepwalking towards his room. Shiina didn't take no for an answer. You said that I can rely on you guys. How can I do that if you can't use any ability? So, we're spending all our time training. Zion and Jaku immediately bolted out, with Shiina and Umisu chasing after them. Once Michael was alone, he brought out his drone and talked to it. Why didn't you come out? He asked. A second later, Kuno manifested out from the drone and landed on her feet. She had been staying in the drone's subspace all this time, simply observing everything that happened through the control room. I got shy, he. Fudge immediately shook his head. A ninja shouldn't be shy. They should be proud. Come, I'll introduce you to the Dragonborns. They're nice. Kuno nodded. Yes, they did look nice. Maybe I will do that. But what? She then pointed upwards, seemingly pointing at the canopy's ceiling. I can't go outside, she said. Michael found this weird. Why? Kuno demonstrated by slowly walking towards the edge, where the shadow of the ceiling no longer blocked the sun's bright rays. As soon as her hand was illuminated by daylight, a sizzling sound echoed out as her hand got immediately burned, as if the sun's rays were literally scorching hot. You can't go out in the sun? Michael asked her. I don't think I can, she replied. Can't go out in the sun? Has blood powers? There's no way. Is she really the original vampire? However, that still didn't make any sense. After all, Guillermo and the other vampires could walk fine in the sun without their skin burning up. He found out from them that the usual clichés about vampires weren't entirely true. Nah, I'm overthinking it. Maybe it's just because she hasn't seen the light of day in 1,000 years, he guessed. He bent down and took out an umbrella from his inventory. Here, use this. Kuno fumbled around with the umbrella before she finally pushed on the button on the handle, opening it up. He showed her how to hold it properly, and she was able to finally walk out in the open without worry. Hee. This is nice, she said, twirling around with the umbrella. You should introduce yourself to Shiina first. No, wait. Grieve first. Both of you have something in common, Fudge said, pushing Kuno by bumping into her legs. He led her into the Rebornian mansion where they all each had their own rooms. Fudge excitedly burst open the front door. However, Kuno didn't follow after him. What are you doing? Follow me, Junior, Fudge said, but Kuno wasn't budging. She remained in front of the doors, standing still. She raised her hand, trying to cross the boundary, but as soon as she did, her hand got burned again, causing her to recoil. There seemed to be an invisible barrier that prevented her from entering inside. Why aren't you following me? Come inside, said Fudge. And finally, after saying those magical words, Kuno finally felt the barrier disappear, allowing her to tumble inside the Rebornian mansion for the first time. She can't enter any private premises until she's invited? The more she learned about Kuno, the more accurate his guesses became. Is she really? No, that's way too coincidental. How could I meet the original vampire just a month after finding out about her existence? Hee, you'll meet everyone at dinner, Fudge said excitedly. There's lots of good food to eat like pizza, fried chicken, and garlic bread. Kuno suddenly covered her mouth and nose. Garlic. Chapter 720, Thrice. After being released into the world after 1,000 years of being chained and trapped inside a Gothic castle, Kuno remembered that couldn't go out into the sun without burning her skin. She couldn't enter into someone's home without their express invitation, and she couldn't stand the sight of garlic. The only thing she needed was an insatiable need for blood. Then she'd be the textbook definition of a vampire. Master, we're going out for a walk, Fudge said, while being hugged by Kuno. Kuno was in full gear. A long-sleeved shirt, long pants, socks, closed shoes, a giant wide-brimmed hat, and even a mask to cover half her face. And if that wasn't enough, she was carrying the biggest umbrella that Michael had ever seen before. This place is so interesting, Kuno said, looking around the bustling streets of the nation of Reborn. Even if I'm afraid of the sun, I can't wait until nighttime to explore. Seeing her excited expression, he couldn't really deny her wish. He just hoped that it wasn't Fudge who would be guiding her. After all, the little slime had a tendency of influencing people into becoming troublemakers with him. Unfortunately, the Dragonborns were busy training, with Shiina pushing her siblings to awaken their abilities as fast as possible. There were some other people that could become Kuno's guide, but since she was more comfortable with Fudge, then it would be better if he led the way. He was planning on having somebody else keep Fudge in check, but he knew that it would be useless. Maybe an innocent Rebornian would also become influenced by Fudge. Just don't cause too much trouble, okay? He asked them. Yes, master. We're just going to go around the nation of Reborn, nothing special. Kuno nodded with him. For some reason, he doubted that. But either way, he couldn't come with them because he was also busy doing his own thing. So while Kuno and Fudge went on their tour, he busied himself with all the things he had to take care of. First and foremost was his own cultivation. Although it had only been 3 months tops after his advancement to the 4th stage of body formation, he felt like it had been ages since he had broken through. With strong competition like the major factions, he knew that he could always use more power. But the problem, of course, was his Godforge pieces. For some reason, he was the only one among them who needed a lot of Godforge pieces. And by a lot, he meant 3 times more. A normal magnetic would only need 5 kilograms of Godforge pieces in order to advance to the 5th stage of body formation. But for him, it would take him a whopping 15 kilograms. That was insane. If he wanted to buy it using sand dollars, then it would cost him 150,000 in total. And it would only continue to go up as he advanced through the body formation stages. This was why he hadn't spent a single sand dollar purchasing Godforge pieces. He almost shuddered at the thought of spending that much just to achieve the same advancement as others. But I shouldn't complain. The large requirement for Godforge probably contributes to the fact that I have a much stronger power than other magnetics. As shown in the auction, he could defeat magnetics 3 to 4 stages above his own. So all in all, spending 3 times as much as other people was still worth it. Still, I don't want to pay that much every time I want to advance. My only choice is to try and find more discoveries like the one in the Red Ravine. Thanks to Fudge, he did obtain the 15 kilograms he needed to advance. But he'd have to find 18 more kilograms if he wanted to advance to the 6th stage after that. There's a better solution to that, you know. Just find some unsuspecting magnetic and rip his Godforge piece away from his heart. As a natural magnetic, Godforge pieces had a tendency of becoming attracted to him, whether he liked it or not. And this proved to be useful, as that was how he advanced to this level without having to purchase his own. But all his unsuspecting donors were people that were not so good people. They were people who didn't deserve to have a reality-bending power at their disposal, as it would only enable them to cause even more harm. That was why he didn't bat an eye when he stole their Godforge pieces. I would rather spend sand dollars than steal an innocent person's Godforge. Then find someone not so innocent, Harbinger quickly quipped. I'm sure if you just walk around cities and towns, you'll eventually find someone who doesn't like the way you walk. Harbinger's solution was to just let the villains come to him, which wasn't all that bad of an idea, to be honest. But he wouldn't pick a fight just to steal their Godforge pieces. If they challenged him, then he would gladly take it. That was the only situation he'd be okay with. Let's not worry about the future. What's important is the present. He sat down on his floor and put down all the boxes they found in the Red Ravine. All of this totaled 15 kilograms, enough for him to finally advance. He picked one up and twisted its top. The frame became bent and revealed an open face. The white flames of the Godforge pieces flickered in his presence. It was as if it knew that there was someone near that could finally touch its flames without getting hurt. He began unboxing the rest of the boxes, letting all 15 kilograms of Godforge pieces see the open air. Then finally he raised his hand. And not even a second later, the droplets of Godforge pieces inside the box started levitating upwards. As they moved closer and closer to him, its speed became faster and faster. And once they were finally out of the box, they suddenly shot towards his chest at an even faster speed than a bullet. Thankfully, he was already prepared for this, so he wasn't thrown backwards like the previous times. The drops coalesced into one giant drop before harmlessly passing through his chest, into his muscles, onto his muscles, and navigating through his organs until they finally met his beating heart. The top part of his heart was covered in a shiny, metallic sheen. Those were his Godforge pieces. And right now, they were pulsating with ability power as if they were beckoning these newcomers into joining them. The droplets splashed into the surfaces of his heart, finally integrating itself onto his body. Immediately, he felt warmth spread throughout his body. The new Godforge pieces were very active, supplying him with tons of ability power. And surprisingly enough, he noticed that the power given off by old Godforge pieces had increased as well. This advancement didn't create an addition of power. It was multiplication. Just then, Harbinger manifested above his head. And it seemed that this new advancement allowed its two arms to finally connect. Harbinger's upper body was finally revealing. Chapter 721. Upper Chest. Nanoparticles began forming at Harbinger's shoulders. It first created the internal circuitry inside Harbinger's body, with the nanoparticles itself becoming the wires and connection points. Then came the armor, forming a paradoxically tough but flexible exterior that protected the internal circuitry. It formed around the trapezoids and shoulder blades, with lights pulsating around edges. Above the upper right chest, there was an inscription molded into the very armor itself. It harbored its name Harbinger. Now that I'm getting a good look at you, you kinda look similar to those mechs that were popular back in my previous world. Kukuka. I'm better. Michael scoffed. We'll see when you show your true form. Judging by this rate, Harbinger would show his full torso at the 6th stage, its legs at the 7th and 8th, and finally, his head at the 9th stage, completing the body formation realm. That's why you should get as many Godforge pieces as you can, as fast as possible. We'll deal with that later, he said as Harbinger's body stopped manifesting. For now, the only thing I can buy with $10 is more upgrades to my drone. He closed his eyes and focused on the upgrade shop. Mithril artifact. Drone. Spirit of old. 0 drops. Vision. Camera. Drone vision. Weapon. Unity firearms. Unity gun. Unity grenade equals 2. Ability. Switch inventory equals 1. Mini drone inventory equals 2. Propeller. Stealth. Muffled propeller. Speed. Double blades equals 1. Frame. Stealth. Camouflage equals 1. Invisibility. Defense. Unity shield equals 1. Expansion. Drones. Mini drone. Isolated room equals 1. Allies. Fudge. Mini drone link. Inhabitation equals 5. Ability equals 5. Shiina. Mini drone link equals 1. Weapon equals 1. Inhabitation equals 5. Ability equals 5. Of course, the main thing that he wanted to buy right now was a mini drone link for Shiina. Linking a mini drone to her weapon would not only open it up for upgrades in the future, but it would add a little bit more protection for her when she truly needs it the most. After all, he found out that even after linking his mini drone to Fudge, he realized that he could still control it as much as he wanted. If he wanted it to turn back into a mini drone, then it would do so in an instant. And since he bought the Unity Gun MK2 upgrade, this meant that all of his mini drones would all have a barrel attached to them for a Unity gun. So, if either Fudge, Shiina, or any other magnetic he links these drones with are in a position where they couldn't defend themselves, then he could turn their weapon back into a drone and give them a lifeline that could save their lives. And speaking of which, it seemed that there was exactly a new type of upgrade he could buy called the Unity Grenade MK2 and the mini drone inventory that specifically helped in that type of situation. Grenade MK2. This upgrade lowers the cooldown needed to reload the ammo into the barrel. Purchasing this upgrade will also allow the mini drone to have their own smaller version of the grenade. Cost. 2 drops. Mini drone inventory. This upgrade allows the mini drones to have an internal space dedicated to a limited amount of switches inside. Cost. 2 drops. These two were very good upgrades. The grenade upgrade would act as sort of a last resort for the Dragonborns since it would create a tremendous amount of explosion that would disable all mana and even abilities for a certain amount of time. As for the mini drone inventory, that would just be a good upgrade in general. He could store switches in there, meaning that if the Dragonborns needed it, then they could take out a switch and invoke his ability power even from a distance. He could store a normal switch or maybe even a Unity Saber in there as an emergency weapon. The best thing about these upgrades was the fact that it applies to all current and future mini-drones in existence. And since he was planning on buying a mini-drone for each Dragonborn, then investing 4 drops for that would totally be worth it in the long run. I would buy this if I had the drops to spend for it. Right now, he had 0 drops of Su left in his arsenal. Not only that, but he still also had to buy the drone hive for him to even get the chance to purchase more mini-drones. Since that would cost 2 drops and each subsequent mini-drone would be 1 drop each, then that meant they had to use 3 drops just to have a mini-drone ready for Shiina. And if he wanted to link it to her, then he'd have to spend another drop. That was 4 drops in total. Thankfully though, his money was just enough to purchase those upgrades. He had 41,523 sand dollars to spend thanks to the generous donation of the elves, which would amount perfectly to 4 drops. Why do all my sand dollars drain so fast? After these upgrades, he would once again go back to near zero. Thankfully though, the Merman theme parks were doing extremely well. According to Castell, it was doing even greater numbers than last month, which meant that his potential income for next month would be more than 30,000 sand dollars. If it wasn't for that, then he'd have gone crazy having all these upgrades but having no money to buy them. He quickly visited Serena in their temporary residence in the nation of Reborn and asked for her help to convert his sand dollars into Su. She happily obliged, doing the same ritual into the water and creating a vortex that seemed to connect into another dimension entirely. Once he dropped the bag containing 40,000 sand dollars into the vortex, it then shot out 4 identical vials of Su directly towards his palms. "Pleasure doing business with you," Serena said. "Business? I thought you were just a middleman." Serena smiled. "Of course I am, but I also get paid. How else am I going to afford going into Cthulhu's void every day with Nixie?" He almost forgot that Serena was an actual princess of Atlantis. She's loaded. Well, at least she's spending her money here. Meanwhile, as Michael was progressing his drone, Kuno and Fudge continued on their way to a certain spot in the nation of Reborn. Eventually, they came across a structure that seemed recently built, but was designed to look old but timeless. "What is this?" Kuno asked, grabbing her chest. "Oh, this is just the Church of the Iron Maiden. This is what I wanted you to see," Fudge said, nudging Kuno closer inside. As she walked closer to the entrance of the church, she carefully raised her hand and waited until that invisible barrier prevented her from entering. But surprisingly, her hand went through. She pushed her hand all the way over inside the church, and still, she was fine. Chapter 7:22. Sis. Kuno entered the Iron Maiden Church cautiously. Meanwhile, Fudge strolled in very confidently, greeting the people and vampires that were either praying on the pews or simply just socializing normally. "Hey Guillermo, what's up?" Fudge greeted. Guillermo shifted his focus away from a mural being painted and greeted Fudge back. "Ah, Honorable Fudge, it is great to see you. The construction of the church is going very smoothly. It won't be long until this masterpiece of ours will be available to the general public. For now, the only ones visiting the Iron Maiden were those already loyal to it, like the vampires and some humans. However, if they wanted to spread the Iron Maiden far out into the world, then they had to increase the number of believers they had. Now, Fudge's motivations for doing this may not be as pure as one might think. But for the vampires, this goal couldn't be more honorable. Finishing the church meant that they would be one step closer to achieving their goal of reconstructing the ancient religion for Gaia and hopefully trigger her revival. That was why they were working on the church day and night with complete and utter devotion. They meticulously curated the decorations, the furniture, and everything else in accordance with what they knew of Gaia, or who was now known as the Iron Maiden, in hopes of it being enough to satisfy her on her arrival. Looking good, Fudge compliments. "Oh hey, I want you to meet someone. Kuno, come on." Kuno shyly approached Guillermo, who took a second of pause to look at her. This girl looked familiar. However, no matter how much he tried to think about it, he couldn't quite place where he'd seen her before. Surely, he'd remember someone looking like her. Yet her mind was coming up blank. "Have we met before?" Guillermo asked her. Kuno shook her head. "I'm not sure." Fudge then leaned into Guillermo and whispered, "She lost her memory." Guillermo nodded his head, finally understanding the context. In truth, he wanted to ask more about who she was. There was something inside his body that was trying to tell him that he knew her, and he couldn't get it out of his mind. But after hearing about her story, Guillermo chose to not ask any more questions, as it could cause her undue mental distress. "Oh, is Michael back home yet?" asked Guillermo. "I wanted to talk to him about the royal vampires." "I'll tell him that you're trying to find him." While Fugue and Guillermo were having a conversation, Kuno pulled ahead and walked over to the giant statue in the altar. She looked up and saw the Iron Maiden as she was seen when she manifested above Michael's head. There was something about the Iron Maiden that fascinated her. It made her want to stay here and stare at her figure for months on end. "I see you've taken a liking to our deity," said Guillermo, smiling. "She created the very earth you're standing on today. She created the air you breathe. She is the mother of creation." The other vampires inside the church murmured their own praise of the Iron Maiden, letting them all echo through the precisely engineered walls and domed ceilings, which all led towards the altar, where the statue of the Iron Maiden could hear their prayers. Kuno looked around, hearing the sounds of hope and desire all converging towards her location. "You like it?" Fudge asked. Kuno nodded. "It's dark in here, no sunlight, but it's still very windy. I'd like to spend a lot of time here." She really appreciated the fact that she didn't have to wear 20 layers of clothes just so that her skin wouldn't constantly burn. No one was more happy than Guillermo. "Well, I for one am glad that we have another member for our community. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, who are you?" "I already told you her name," Fudge exclaimed. "No, I mean, who is she in terms of her connections? Is she just a friend? A new ally of Michael? Or is she his sister?" That blonde hair was very striking, almost as striking as that of Michael's, which made him think that the two were related to each other. Sure. She's Master's sister." Meanwhile, back in his room, Michael had just returned after purchasing the 4 drops of Sue that he needed. "Hachoo!" he sneezed. "Is someone talking about me? Why do I have the feeling that Fudge is up to no good?" With his instincts riling up, he knew that he had to finish up his tasks and check up on how Fudge and Kuno were faring on their little tour. He quickly uncapped each vial and poured them directly onto his main drone. Immediately, the transparent droplets got absorbed into the mithril, with the change reflecting into the upgrade shop window in his mind. Spirit of Old. 4 drops. Using 2 drops, he quickly purchased the Drone Hive upgrade, finally allowing him to buy as much mini-drones as he wanted for the low price of only 1 drop per drone. He purchased 1 extra mini-drone and a pop-up window immediately appeared in his vision. "New mini-drone detected. Would you like to pair this new drone to Shiina?" He immediately said yes, spending his last drop to finally add Shiina to the official list of Rebornian magnetics. Nanoparticles, similar to the phenomenon of his diva growing its limbs, started to cover the drone's very top frame where the mini-drone was supposed to dock. It was now constructing the new mini-drone from the bottom to the top. It only took a total of 30 minutes before the new upgrade was finally ready to be used. "Shiina," he called out to the shadow underneath his feet. "Can you come here for a second, please?" Not even a few seconds later, a large shadow emerged in his room as Shiina and a shadow orcupine teleported directly in front of him. With his job done, the shadow orc bowed to him before disappearing back into the shadows. Shiina, on the other hand, quickly tidied up her slightly messy clothes, scuff marks from her sparring sessions with her siblings, and greeted Michael with a bow. "You called, Lord Michael? Can I see your bow?" he asked her. She immediately took out her mithril artifact bow and presented it to him proudly. "The Darkwood is showing to be a game-changer for archery, Lord Michael. This is the most perfect bow I've ever used," she said. Michael smiled at her. "Well, it's about to get even better." He then took out his drone and saw the new mini-drone docked perfectly on top of the main drone. Since he'd already purchased the Link upgrade, this new mini-drone was already automatically connected to Shiina, taking on a new appearance that was perfectly suited to her tastes. The drone's frame was white, just like her scales, with its camera being the biggest emphasis. After all, perception was an archer's biggest weapon. Chapter 723. Scope. Now, the mini-drone was finally ready for Shiina to use. But unlike Fudge, she already had her own mithril artifact weapon that didn't need any adjustments. The bow already had a perfect frame and string, courtesy of the Darkwood given by the elves. Thankfully, the mini-drone could take the appearance of anything they so desired. As soon as he put it close to Shiina's mithril artifact bow, it suddenly shot out of his hands and attached itself to the center of her weapon. Nanoparticles started to arise from the mini-drone as it began disassembling itself into particles. Then a second later, it began forming an entirely new item, circling the very thickness of the bow positioned perfectly where Shiina's line of sight would be once she wielded the bow in her hands. Her bow now had a scoped attachment. Thanks to her new ability power, she could hit anything she set her eyesights onto. With a scope like this, she could extend her range of effectiveness far beyond that of her own vision. Right now, the scope only had about an 8x magnification, but since this was a mithril relic weapon, there was lots of potential for upgrades in the future. "Try ITY out," he said to Shiina. After he handed it to her, she immediately stood ramrod straight and took out a simple arrow from her quiver and loaded it into her bow. She then grabbed its strings, pulling it towards her chin before looking down the scope. She squinted as she looked in the distance. "How do you like it?" And before he even finished his sentence, she suddenly released a shot out into the distance, with the arrow quickly disappearing into the skies. And with quick succession, she took out another arrow and fired it in the same direction. Those were real arrows. He thought that she'd just look through the scope just to see what it would be like. But he didn't actually think that she'd take a shot, much less two. The arrows traveled through to the other side of the nation of Reborn before finally arcing down towards a specific courtyard where Rebornian soldiers were practicing their skills. Jaku and Zion were supposed to be practicing their skills like Amisu, but instead Jaku was laying down in the shed, while Zion was playing around, causing a ruckus, and distracting the other Rebornians from finishing their training. They thought they were free from the tyrannical gaze of Shiina, but suddenly, an arrow suddenly grazed past their ears and landed into the ground, scaring them witless. Jaku and Zion looked around, anxious as they thought that Shiina was out there somewhere, staring at them. They quickly got up and joined Amisu with their training. Fufu. This new scope is very useful, Lord Michael. Thank you, Shiina said gleefully. Since Shiina wasn't that irresponsible, he knew that she wouldn't accidentally hit someone just innocently walking in the streets. But to think that she would even shoot her own siblings. Shiina was quite strict. Even more than before. Did something happen? He asked her. Shiina bowed towards him. It has come to my attention that I, alone, cannot hold up the entirety of the Reborn Company without your presence. I need their help. I need my siblings to awaken their abilities as fast as possible so that we could be of use to you. That is why I have increased our training time, Lord Michael. I want to someday have you rely on us, instead of us relying on you. He wasn't going to argue with that since he truly did need the Dragonborns to awaken their divas. After all, it was basically limiting their progression in the body formation realm. Since Shiina and Fudge awakened their abilities, they could now advance to the next stages almost immediately. If he had enough sand dollars to buy more Godforge pieces, then he would have advanced them both to the second stage already. The only other barrier they would face would be if they needed to awaken a new ability, and from his experience, he knew that that wouldn't happen until they were in the third stage of body formation. So, he was planning to get 10 kilos of Godforge pieces to advance them both to the third stage as fast as possible. A kilo goes for 10,000 sand dollars, so he had to save up for a few more months until he could buy it. I really need to find a way to earn more sand dollars. The Merman theme park worked extremely well and now became his best source of income. If he could find a way to entice both the vampires and the elves to visit the nation of Reborn and spend their sand dollars there, then he could essentially triple his monthly earnings. After Shiina left to continue her practice with the Dragonborns, he began thinking up of ways to target the elves and the vampires. I could make a new roller coaster for the elves. Into Cthulhu's Void worked so well because all mermen had an instinctual fear for the ancient primordial beast hiding under the sea. Thankfully, it seemed that elves had a similar fear about a creature. The Zephyrs. According to Shiina and the others, Zephyrs were non-living creatures whose nature was completely opposite to that of the elves. They were born simply to cause destruction to the entire elven race. Not only that, but they seemed to have powers that completely countered an elf's perception and natural aim. Most of their race were completely helpless when dealing with Zephyrs. Only a select few had the talent and ability to defeat them. Suffice it to say, elves definitely had some strong emotions regarding Zephyrs. But it's not fear. I bet most of them are angry at Zephyrs. Is that enough to stimulate their Dao hearts? After thinking about it some more, he decided that it was worth at least a try. If he could make a roller coaster focused on Zephyrs, he could target the elven demographic that would be coming to Metropolis in a month. This time, though, he was planning on creating a really bold idea. Instead of realistic animatronics, he wanted to have real Zephyrs in the roller coaster. He didn't even know how he was going to do that or if that was even possible, but if he were to succeed, then it could have the same success as Into Cthulhu's Void. He was basing this all off of some themed rides back in his previous life. There were some roller coasters with built-in play guns that each rider was equipped with. And once the roller coaster set off, they would shoot targets found in the environment and score points based on their performance. This was the perfect roller coaster for the elves, who were all proficient with the bow. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. However, the problem still remained. How was he going to get Zephyrs to stay in the ride? How was he even going to get them? Zephyrs were only found in the Elven Kingdom, and the Zephyrs that they encountered in the Red Ravine were only there because of a spatial anomaly. But then he remembered. He already went to the Elven Kingdom. Chapter 724. Ideas for the Elves. Kuno was most probably imprisoned at or near the Elven Kingdom. If his guess was true, then he could travel back there and encounter a Zerfi in its natural habitat. He still had a problem of how to transfer and contain them to the roller coaster, but he could solve that on another day. For now, he at least knew where to find them. I could go there right now. Of course, going into an unknown location could be very dangerous, especially if there were Zephyrs around. And since he'd be going to their homeland, he could encounter tens or even hundreds of them at the same time. Combined, the explosion they created could level the entire continent off the face of the earth. Even he wouldn't survive from that. If he did go there, then he had to be extremely prepared to fight them off or be prepared for a stealthy entrance. Thankfully though, he had a vehicle specifically upgraded for stealth. He prepared his main drone exactly for this occasion. It could turn invisible, it could pass through solid objects, and it could turn itself into something as small as a bird and soften the propeller's noise to effectively only a few meters in diameter. If he really wanted to, then his drone could take him anywhere undetected. However, he still wasn't in a hurry to go off on another adventure. If he went there now, he'd basically be going in blind. He knew nothing about the place he'd be going to. He didn't know its inhabitants, its dangers, and lots more. He didn't even know how he was going to take those Zephyrs back home, or if he should even do it at all. I guess it wouldn't hurt to take a look. His plan was to just look around the environment and make a mental map of what he could see. That way, if he ever saw a landmark, then he could cross-reference that with a map of the world and actually see where he ended up. This way, he wouldn't have to explore the unknown lands and put himself in unneeded dangers. I should get out of the house first. Teleporting will definitely cause major mana disruption in the entirety of the nation of Reborn. He grabbed his main drone and touched the miniature doors on the backside, teleporting him inside the control room. Once there, he was ready to pilot it to find a suitable spot for him to teleport from. But just as he was about to move, he realized that there was something different inside the control room. Every wall was surrounded by monitors that let him see the outside world from within. Placed around the room were these futuristic computer terminals showcasing the various telemetry of the environment like temperature, wind speed, etc. But in the corner of his eyes, he saw something different. He saw an inconspicuous door on the other side of the room, right next to new terminal screens that were turned off, showing only a black image. What's this? He walked up to the door and saw the circular lock on the front. This door was designed like the doors on ships, where one had to twist the wheel in order to get the lock to open. Curious about this new addition, he tried to twist the lock. But it wouldn't budge. The wheel was rock solid, even when he used magic that enhanced his physical attributes. It made him doubt if it was even possible to open it. ChatJK5, what is this? That is a locked upgrade for the drone, she said. Upgrade? To answer his question, ChatJK5 showed the upgrade shop window to a nearby screen on the wall. Once displayed, he saw all the usual upgrades. But this time, there was an option that was pulsating and glowing, attracting his attention. Pocket Dimension. Subspace. Isolated room equals 1. This was a new upgrade for the Pocket Dimension, one that he had yet to unlock. So, this door leads to that isolated room? And I have to purchase the upgrade first before this door is opened? Precisely. What does this upgrade entail? Isolated room. This upgrade allows access to a private room inside the subspace. The room will be completely secluded from everything, letting not even air, heat, or light seep out of the room. The room's complete dimensions are 10 by 10 by 10 feet and can be made bigger through expansion upgrades. A room that doesn't let anything in or out. It was basically a completely sterilized space, which was completely cut off from reality itself. It was basically an upgraded version of a pocket dimension. What would I even use this upgrade for? I'll just spend my drops on something else. Maybe I'll buy it if I succeed in building the roller coaster for the elves. Wait, upon first thought, it didn't seem all that useful for him. After all, he had no need for a completely isolated room. He couldn't even think of a way that this would be useful. Even the other useless upgrades for his drone would have been a much better use for his money. But then he remembered. What is an isolated room good for? Well, a room cut off from everything meant that there would be no contaminants present inside. There would be no unaccounted changes in air quality, temperature, and heat. In short, this place would be a perfect greenhouse. A greenhouse for what? Darkwood. According to the elves, darkwood was an extremely volatile material that was incredibly hard to grow, even under the most optimal conditions. It needed to be built in elven soil. There needed to be just enough sunlight, enough water, enough wind, and everything else. Just one mistake from those very numerous requirements would cause the plant to die out almost immediately, with no recovery whatsoever. It was so hard to grow darkwood that even the elves were unable to succeed. They had to journey out of their homeland to try and find darkwood left behind by the ancient humans just so that they could use it for their bows. If the elves weren't able to do it, then no one else could. But maybe, just maybe, he could grow it using this isolated room. Although this room didn't have the elven soil that the darkwood required, he could always dump soil inside and create a mini farm inside. It was perfect because he was already planning on going to the elven continent anyway to see if he could catch some zephyrs. On the way, he could pick up some quality soil and cover the entire floor of the isolate room with it to grow his darkwood into. It was perfect. If he succeeded, then he would have found a way to make an obscene amount of money from the elves. They would definitely pay top dollar to buy the legendary darkwood from him. At the very least, he expected it to cost more than 20,000 sand dollars each. And the best thing about this was that if he succeeded, Then he could plant more and more darkwood and effectively farm them for sand dollars. This idea was so good that he had to table the roller coaster for another time. Planting darkwood would be so much more luxurious. Chapter 725. Wand Gift. Planting darkwood would be a complete game changer. But there was just one problem. He didn't have enough Sue drops to buy the isolated room upgrade. It only cost 1 drop, but he currently had 0 in his inventory. He didn't even have enough sand dollars to purchase it. I guess I have no choice. I really do have to wait until next month. Darkwood only needed a month before it grew mature enough to be harvested. That was why he wanted to plant the darkwood as soon as possible so that he could have it ready by the time the elves arrived in Metropolis. But that wouldn't be possible now. It's fine. This month will give me enough time to prepare and do research on my own. Just like with the Zephyrs, the best way to learn about cultivating darkwood was through the elves. Only they knew those two concepts well enough to help him in his goals. But since they wouldn't arrive until a month later, this meant that he could either wait or search for answers all on his own. Of course, a good place to find some general knowledge about the world would be a magic tower. They hoarded all kinds of information ranging from magic spells, to bestiaries, to almanacs, and everything else in between. They weren't dubbed as scholars for nothing. It's also good to visit Braxton. I still owe him a mithril artifact. He briefly visited the dwarven blacksmiths in the nation of Reborn and tasked them with their help in creating a suitable wand for Braxton. About an hour later, he received the finished product in a nice little rectangular wooden box. Then, he quickly transported himself to Metropolis, right on the footsteps of the magic tower. He could have teleported directly inside, but he wasn't that familiar with Lucius and the other mages yet, so he didn't want to come off as rude, especially when he was going to ask them for a favor. He entered the portal, finding himself back in the magical hallways filled with floating candlesticks, moving paintings, and paradoxical staircases that seemed to be upside down and right side up at the same time. As soon as he walked through the hallways, he suddenly heard excited murmurings and shoutings echoing across the whole room. This was quite unusual since magic towers were famous for being places of peace and quiet. This was supposed to be a space where one could study and read at peace without anyone interrupting them. But this shouting made it look like they were at a wet market of some sorts. He followed the direction of the sound and found himself entering a completely new hallway that he hadn't been to before. The sounds of shouting got louder and louder as he got closer, until eventually, he saw the end of the tunnel. Entering the room, he found himself in the company of mages and wizards alike, shouting, jumping, and cheering for something in the middle of the room. He floated up and tried to see what was going on. Yeah, go Porkchop. I'm rooting for you. My money's on Chris P. Bacon. Do you see the flabs on that pig? Come on, come on. If I were him, I would have already caught at least 1 pig. Michael was completely speechless as he saw what these scholars were cheering for. Right in the middle of the room, there was a small stage filled with wet mud, and about 5 small piglets running around, splashing mud and getting the front seats dirty. Among the pigs were one man, whose eyes were blindfolded using magical restraints. He was fumbling around, following the sounds of oinks, oinks, and trying to catch at least one of them in his arms. Unfortunately, the pigs proved to be far more intelligent than normal. They evaded the man's grasp with a scoffing expression painted on their faces. These were intelligent little piggies. Once the time ran out, the man disappointedly took off his blindfolds and exited the arena. Michael! With the game over, Braxton finally noticed him. You're just in time. Do you want to see if you can catch any pigs? If you do, you can win them yourself. Michael turned silent. For eating? No, no, no. As a pet. I bred these pigs to be very intelligent. I'll pass on that, Michael replied. Oh, I see, Braxton said, disappointed. What did you come here for? Did you miss your best friend? You can say that. Here, I brought this to you as a gift, he said, handing the box to Braxton. Even without knowing what it was, Braxton looked extremely pleased. Just knowing that you're thinking of me is already a gift. Then he opened the box, and as soon as he saw what was inside, his eyes immediately widened. He carefully took it out of its container, holding it with both his hands. This was a very special wand, one that had an orange body and a leafy green handle. It was a wand in the shape of a carrot, with very realistic grooves and coloring that made it look like the real thing. A carrot wand. OMG. As soon as Braxton held it up in the air, the pigs in the muddy arena suddenly looked up at the wand with an intense gaze. They were salivating at the sight. It's perfect, Braxton exclaimed. Now my piggies will follow my orders without question. I just hope that they won't eat it, mistaking it for the real thing. At first, Braxton didn't even notice the fact that the wand was a mithril artifact. He was so fascinated with it being a carrot that it completely passed him by. It was only when he tried casting a spell did he finally realize the truth. This is. Michael nodded. Yep. Take good care of it, buddy. He was one of the few people outside Reborn that he gave a mithril artifact to. I can't believe it. OMG. Thanks, bestie. Braxton went in for a hug, and Michael smartly avoided it at the last second or else his ribs would have shattered. Braxton wasn't exactly a thin guy. This gift is way too good. I have to give you something back. Tell me anything and I'll give it to you. Michael wasn't expecting a gift back, but it would be nice to have some help regarding the information he wanted. Actually, I came here to find something about Darkwood, Zephyrs, and everything else related. Do you know where in the library I can find it? Braxton grabbed his shoulders. Foo-foo. Don't you worry, bestie. I'll show you what you want. Just give me a moment. Then, Braxton quickly left the room, rushing past wizards and bumping them out of the way. Michael thought he'd only be gone for a few minutes at least, but an hour had already passed by and he still hadn't returned yet. Thankfully, the pig games were still ongoing, so he had something to keep him company while he waited. Then, 2 hours after he first disappeared, Braxton finally came back carrying many scrolls and books in his chest. Here. Everything you need to learn is in these books. Chapter 726. Experiment 284. Braxton plopped all of the books and scrolls onto the ground, producing a hefty thud. Michael began looking through the literature, noticing that most of them were quite extravagant. Usually, books found in the Magic Tower were ancient scrolls and torn-up books that were stored to preserve the history of the world. But these were different. Some were lined with actual gold, making them look like it was a holy artifact. Some were made out of material that were extremely rare according to ChatJK5. There was even one book that was literally bound up in chains. Where did you get these books? He asked Braxton. His chubby bestie waved off his concern. Oh, it's nothing really. I just took them in our private library back in the Guild of Arcana. He stared at Braxton. The Guild? You mean the organization controlling all magic towers in the world? Yeah, Braxton replied. Don't worry. They probably won't need that. Probably. As it turned out, Braxton went back to the very headquarters of the Guild of Arcana and stole all of the sacred books and scrolls that pertained to Zephyrs, Darkwood, and Elves. Although Braxton was a future mystic master, stealing books from their sacred library was definitely considered a crime. And it was especially bad giving it to someone that wasn't even part of the guild. You're giving this to me? Aren't you going to get in trouble? It's fine, Braxton replied. Anything for my bestie. Michael had a feeling that Braxton would have still done this even if he hadn't given him the mithril artifact wand. He was just that good of a friend. I really appreciate this, Braxton. I'll give it back to you as soon as I read it. No problem, Braxton replied. Then, he quickly went back to the pig game and used his new carrot wand to command his pigs. It seemed to be working as they all followed the wand like a mindless hive. Michael then picked up every single one of the books and found a nice quiet spot on one of the winding hallways of the Magic Tower. Then, he began reading the titles and found them to be exactly what he wanted to read. The History of the Elven Race. Elven Kingdom Topography. Darkwood Experiments Ver 284. Zephyr Expedition by Lazarus Cadaver. Secrets to Elven Archery. Unfinished Dash. Oh. There were about 15 books in total, each one tackling a specific area of the Elven Kingdom. Some of them were nice to know in general, like their hierarchies, culture, and other things that would be useful if he wanted to visit the Elven Kingdom in the future. But there were a select few that he was truly interested in reading. The first one being the Darkwood Experiments Ver 284. Does this mean that they had already performed 283 versions before this? Curious to see what kind of experiments they performed with Darkwood, he eagerly opened the first page. Then, he let ChatJK5 do her thing. Immediately, his personal AI assistant began processing the information at incredibly fast speeds. It didn't even take a second after he opened the page did a notification arrive in his vision. Would you like me to give you a summarized version of the book? That would be great, thanks. Darkwood Experiments Ver 284. This book contains the numerous trials and tribulations that the Guild of Arcana experienced when they tried to grow Darkwood all on their own. The first hurdle they went through was the soil. They tried numerous alternatives to elven-grown soil, but have come up short every time. Even when they tried to replicate every single aspect, Darkwood still refused to stay alive past 2 to 3 days. They have concluded that elven soil has an intangible aspect that Darkwood needs to survive. The second hurdle was finding the perfect balance for heat, wind, and sunlight. Darkwood needed to face the sun constantly, even during nighttime. This is possible in the furthermost point of the Elven Kingdom where the days are longer than the nights. But in the Royal Continent, there is no such place that receives more sunlight than others. The unnamed experimenters used magical light mana to replicate the effects of sunlight, to no avail. Darkwood refused to grow. They have yet to find a suitable solution to this problem. Its heat and wind conditions are also one of the things they struggled with the most. Darkwood needed the right amount of wind and heat at different points of the day, needing constant care and attention. The experimenters struggled to keep up, and one slip-up caused the darkwood to immediately die. Another aspect they had to worry about was moisture. Darkwood needed a constant watering source, but only in its roots. Once its main stem receives too much water, it will soften up and become unrecognizable to darkwood. ChatJK5 continued on, giving him an extensive summary of the hardships that the experimenters went through, only to fail in growing darkwood beyond 7 days. They weren't kidding when they said it's hard to grow darkwood. And surprisingly, the experimenters also thought of growing darkwood in a completely isolated space. They did most of their experiments in a pocket dimension as they tried to get rid of any unnecessary contaminants. This meant that having an isolated space won't necessarily allow him to be able to magically grow darkwood. But he wasn't planning on doing that in the first place. He was going to use his good, old-fashioned knowledge from his previous life. Agriculture back there was on a whole other level, with farmers being able to control temperature, water quantity and quality, and even soil acidity to make sure that crops grow with the best conditions possible. Mages and wizards may be able to make fire out of nothing, but they couldn't quite measure how hot it is compared to normal humans. With technology, controlling every single aspect of farming could be very feasible. With ChatJK5 at his side, creating those high-tech measuring technologies would be easy. The only thing that he needed to find out was the exact requirements for darkwood to grow. And thanks to this book, he knew exactly what they were, which meant that he could grow it right now. He couldn't believe how lucky he was that he had a friend like Braxton. The man just gave him the most valuable piece of information he had ever received in his life. Just then, he suddenly heard stomping echoing around the hallways. Braxton! He heard Lucius, the tower master, angrily calling out to Braxton. Michael walked towards them, seeing Lucius looking all disappointed at his bestie. Braxton, I can't believe that you stole documents from the sacred library. Do you know how valuable they are? Lucius said angrily. We treat knowledge just as valuable as gold, and you just gave it away? Michael immediately stepped forward. He didn't want to be the cause for all of this. Lucius, it's my fault. I asked Braxton for help, he said. But before the tower master could even say anything, Braxton waved his wand in his face, showing his new carrot wand. But look at what Michael gave me. I could not give him anything in return, could I? Lucius shook his head. A carrot wand? Do you know how valuable those books are? What the F? Chapter 727, Lazarus Cadaver. Lucius finally noticed the unmistakable sheen on Braxton's carrot wand. It was unmistakable. It wasn't like the other mithril relic wands with rusted handles of broken-off tips. This was a mithril artifact in its purest conditions, only seen in the weapons wielded by Michael and his company. That's a mithril artifact, he exclaimed. He gave that to you? Yep, that's my bestie, bragged Braxton as he waved his new wand around. Michael still felt bad about getting Braxton in trouble, so he quickly tried to apologize on his behalf. Hey, I'll return the books, he said. I'm just about finished reading them anyway. But before he could even finish his sentence, Lucius suddenly grabbed his shoulders and looked at him with intense desperation. Do you need more? I can get you more. I'll ransack the entire Guild of Arcana for you, Lucius declared. If Braxton could get his own customized mithril artifact in exchange for some few documents that probably wasn't even that important to the guild, then Lucius was willing to do even more than that to get one himself. He was even willing to commit crimes to get whatever Michael wanted. Michael, I'll do anything for a wand, Lucius begged. Just tell me what to do. Seeing a tower master begging like this was definitely a new sight to behold. He was supposed to be a dignified leader of the magic tower, but now he was even bowing lower than the pigs just to get a mithril artifact of his own. But Lucius wasn't embarrassed. If other people, heck, if the other leaders of the Guild of Arcana learned about this, then he was sure that they would have acted the same way given the chance to get a real mithril artifact. Okay, you didn't have to kneel, Michael said, relenting. I'll see what I can do. After promising Lucius that he was going to get a mithril artifact wand on his own, Michael went back to his room to continue learning about the elves. As thanks, he was allowed to have the scrolls and the books that Braxton gave him. He didn't know if Lucius had the authority to do such a thing, but it didn't matter. He was thankful. He looked at the next book called The Zephyr Expedition by Lazarus Cadaver. Lazarus Cadaver? Who is that? His answer was soon answered as he flipped to the first page, seeing the first entry from what seemed to be the diary of Lazarus as he traveled to the Elven Kingdom, as well as an introduction of who he was. Day 1. I found myself intensely curious about zephyrs. They're such weird creatures. They're not even alive. Cerberus and the other mystic masters are busy teaching their own prodigies and protégés for the next generation. But I can't be bothered. I have to learn more about the zephyrs. And so, here I am. in the middle of a forest with zephyrs hot on my tail. Cerberus? He didn't expect to see the name of that old man here. He only ever saw Cerberus as a chill, laid-back old man who lazes around in the nation of Reborn without doing anything, that he forgot that the man was actually a genuine mystic master. And judging from the context, it seemed that Lazarus was a mystic master as well. I should ask Cerberus later about this Lazarus guy. For now, he wanted to focus on the contents of the diary, so he let ChatJK5 do her thing and condense a 400-page document into only a few paragraphs containing the most important bits. Most of the book contains the day-to-day life of Lazarus as he has close encounters with the Zephyrs. He goes into detail about their habitats, their behavior patterns, as well as his opinions as to why they exist. Is there anything about restraining Zephyrs or keeping them in a cage? Yes. Lazarus made many attempts to contain a Zephyr so that he could research them in close proximity. He was not able to succeed. He was forced to do his research on-site, taking him close to 5 years to reach a conclusion for his findings. This was disappointing to hear. If Lazarus had somehow found a way to basically neutralize a Zephyr's explosive tendencies, then that would have basically solved his roller coaster problem. I'll have to do an experiment of my own once I get there. Thankfully, journeying out into the Zephyr's homeland wouldn't be that dangerous anymore thanks to Lazarus' extensive detailing of the whole map. ChatJK5 showed him the sketch and converted it into a full 3D map, allowing him to see where Zephyrs were usually located, or what Lazarus called his hotspots. Then, Michael read the other 13 books on elves, allowing ChatJK5 to basically become fluent in the elven culture. If he needed to know something, then she could tell him the answer in an instant. He won't be clueless anymore if he travels to the Elven Kingdom. I'll deal with the Zephyr/roller coaster idea later. For now, I want to focus on Darkwood. He basically had everything he needed to start his farm. Building the technology for automated sprinklers and temperature regulators will be easy. As for the elven soil, he'd just scoop them up once he goes to the Elven Kingdom. He didn't even have to worry about the seed. According to the Darkwood Experiments book, one could simply splice a tiny portion of stem from a Darkwood and use it as a seed to grow more. All he had to do was ask Shiina for a tiny little favor, and then he'd have the seed to grow Darkwood. The only other problem that he faced now was the fertilizer. According to the book, the experimenters found that using morel spores achieved the greatest results. It was what the elves also used in their attempts to grow Darkwood. Where am I going to get morel spores? He didn't even know what kind of material that was. But according to the book, morel spores weren't super rare. They weren't prevalent, but they also weren't that hard to find if one looked for it. So, it was very well possible that someone in Metropolis knows or even sells morel spores that he could use. Back to Metropolis I go, he said as he transported himself into Barnaby's vault. Barnaby would surely know where to find some morel spores. He quickly went up the stairs and entered into his room, finding Barnaby looking over some paperwork. "Ah, Michael. It's great to see you. What brings you there?" Michael told him about his need for morel spores. Thankfully, Barnaby knew just the place. There's this small store called Sporetastic located on the lower left quadrant of Metropolis. They sell all kinds of mushroom spores wholesale. If anyone's got morel spores, then it would be them. "Thanks, Barnaby." "No problem," Barnaby said. "If you're planning on selling your mithril artifacts for a very hefty price, then you know where to find me." Michael was surprised that Barnaby already heard about the incident in the magic tower. "I'll think about it," he replied. Then he set off to find his fertilizer. Chapter 728, Shrooms. Michael followed the directions for Sporetastic and found a quaint little shop shaped in the form of a mushroom in the corner of a street. He opened the door, immediately smelling mushrooms and seeing spores flying around in the air. "Excuse me, is anybody there?" he asked. A peculiar old man with a bulbous nose reminiscent of a mushroom got up from the counter, having bent down to pick up something from the floor. "Yes? Have you come to experience a new world?" the old man asked creepily. "Huh? No, I just wanted to buy some morel powder," Michael replied. The old man walked closer to him. "Really? I assure you that taking a small bit of this thing can make you feel like you're in another world. You'll see the cosmos in its entirety." He was presented with a vial containing a single mushroom. "I have assessed the mushroom to be psilocybe cubensis, or more commonly known as hallucinogenic mushrooms." Michael thought that this store only offered mushrooms meant for medicine or cooking, but as it turned out, this place was for people who like to get high. "Oh, you seem to know about this," said the old man. "I got something a little bit stronger in the back. Those will work best with magicians." Michael had no doubt that whatever the old man offered him would be effective even with magically inclined people. However, he had no intention of participating in this hobby, at least for now. "No thanks. I don't want another out-of-body experience," he said, rejecting the offer. "Well, too bad," said the old man. "If you ever want to open your third eye, then you can come to me and I can offer you something good." Then, The old man walked back to his counter and began looking through his cabinets, eventually finding a rectangular wooden box that was full of dust and cobwebs. It seemed to have been sitting in his inventory for a couple of years at least. "Here it is, morel spores," said the old man unenthusiastically, pushing the box towards Michael. Michael then opened the box, seeing a balled-up roll of paper. He carefully unfolded it and saw a pinchful of reddish-gold powder inside. "I can confirm that it is indeed morel spores," said ChatJK5. This was what Darkwood loved to consume the most. They absorbed this powder even more than water, which meant that this paltry amount wouldn't be enough to even sustain Darkwood for 2 days. The old man leaned on the counter. "Are you sure you want to buy this? More spores barely gives me any hits. It doesn't even my third eye. So morel spores are a bit hallucinogenic. That's good to know." He didn't want to accidentally ingest it and suddenly hear new voices in his head. Harbinger and ChatJK5 were already stressful enough. "I'm offended," commented Harbinger. Michael ignored him and asked the old man about how to get more morel spores. "Do you have more?" he asked. "How much do you want?" "About 30 times as much," Michael replied. "Do you have that much?" The old man raised his eyebrows, wondering what Michael would use those spores for, but he didn't ask. "No, I don't," he replied. "But I can make more." "Really? That would be great." But the old man leaned on the counter and gave Michael a sleazy look. "Growing that much morel spores will take away from me growing more of the good shrooms, if you get what I'm saying." Michael nodded. Price wasn't an issue for him. "I can pay a lot for it," he said. But the old man wagged his finger. I don't want money. I want you to take one of these." Michael was once again presented with the vial of hallucinogenic mushrooms. But this time it was different. It had glowing spots on its stem, making it look poisonous. But that wasn't the only thing that Michael noticed. He felt his heart reacting to the mushroom. It was stimulating his God-forged pieces. Somehow, this hallucinogenic mushroom was filled with ability power. He couldn't understand how that was even possible. Plants, animals, and even mushrooms could mutate to wield magic. But ability power was a different thing. It could only be imbued into something. It wasn't naturally occurring. This could only mean one thing. This old man wasn't as simple as he thought. "So, do you dare to take the offer? If you do, then I'm willing to supply you with morel spores as much as you want." Michael was very apprehensive of this whole situation. He felt very cautious about the mushroom and what it would do to him, especially now that he realized that it contained ability power. "What do you think, Harbinger? Do you think this old man did something weird to the mushroom? Poisonous? No. The ability power is only meant to boost the hallucinogenic properties of the mushroom, meaning that even magnetics won't be exempted from its effects. According to Harbinger, this mushroom was completely safe, aside from the fact that it would give its consumer a really wild psychedelic trip. Should I do it? He was really tempted to say yes. After all, the prospect of farming his own Darkwood was too promising to pass off. By taking this mushroom, he'd have a reliable supplier of morel spores, which would kickstart his agriculture journey that could potentially earn him hundreds of thousands of sand dollars. The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to do it. "Are you sure that it's going to be safe?" he asked the old man. "Of course. You don't see me dead, do you?" That wasn't very reliable. "The only thing you have to worry about is the fact that you must remember that everything you experience in the trip isn't real. It's all an illusion. You mustn't fall for its trap." Michael was pretty confident that he'd be able to tell which was real or which was not. Even if he couldn't, he had ChatJK5 and Harbinger to help him decide. "All right, I'll take it," he decided. "Good," said the old man. "Don't worry, I'll take it with you." The old man then excitedly led Michael to the sofa, where they sat comfortably. Then, he gave Michael one of the vials and kept one for himself. Without even a single hesitation, the old man opened the vial and downed the entire mushroom in one go. "See you on the other side," said the old man, before his eyes closed and his head plopped down to his shoulder. He just looked like he was asleep. "At least I know I won't immediately die from this." Michael took the top off the vial and took one last look at the mushroom before putting it in his mouth. Surprisingly enough, it tasted a little bit sweet. He began chewing on the mushroom, but felt nothing different at all. Even when he consumed all of it, he didn't fall asleep like the old man. He just stayed conscious. "Did it not work? It seems that you have an immunity to this specific type of mushroom," said ChatJK5. Just then, Michael felt a little bit drowsy. Then his eyes closed. "Wake up! Wake up!" Chapter 729. Reborn? Michael opened his eyes and saw himself staring at a dimly lit ceiling. "That looks familiar," he thought. "You're awake." He looked to the side and saw an unfamiliar woman sitting right beside him. She was wearing a bright orange vest and a white hard hat with a green cross painted on the front. "An EMT?" he muttered out. Yes, I am, the woman answered. We just got a report from your watch that you seem to have suffered a major heart attack. We'll take you to the ambulance now. Then he heard the door open as two men came inside, carrying a large stretcher towards his side. Huh! What's happening? He looked around and saw a scene that almost gave him another heart attack. Right by his side was his prized collection of anime mangas and figurines. Beside that was his personal computer still turned on, with the screen frozen at a loose screen from one of his favorite FPS games. What the hell? This was his room from his previous life back before he was reborn. Sir, are you all right? Will Carrie go to the ambulance now? Said one of the EMTs. But he immediately shook his head and said, No need. I'm fine. He stood up, stumbling for a few seconds before he finally found his footing. Are you sure, sir? It looks like you still need some first aid, said the woman. I'm fine, he insisted. He was still trying to take a grasp of what happened to him. When he took the mushroom, he didn't expect to find himself suddenly back in his old room right where he left off. For a brief second, it made him think that everything he experienced in the royal continent was just a dream. The realness of the situation made him think that he just had a lucid near-death experience. Reborn, Metropolis, his family, it was surreal to believe that everything was just a dream. Going to the hospital certainly wouldn't help him now. After all, no one would ever believe him when he tells them that he experienced 13 years in another world where magic and monsters existed. This is just a hallucinogenic experience from the mushroom, he tried to convince himself. Don't go thinking I'm gone. Suddenly, he heard Harbinger's voice echo out from his mind. He didn't think he'd be this relieved to hear him in this moment. You're still here. Of course I am. Did you think that it was all a dream? Michael was ashamed to say that he did think about it for a brief second. But the appearance of Harbinger, and therefore of abilities and magic, meant that everything that happened in the royal continent was real. It wasn't a dream. ChatJK5? You hear? However, the presence of his trusted AI partner was severely missing. Why is she gone and you're still here? He asked Harbinger. I don't know. But good riddance, am I right? Michael had no idea why he was here. He had no idea if this was even a hallucination in the first place. It certainly felt real, as he felt the pricking sensation of a needle as the emergency medical technicians gave him some medicine to make his condition better. Once they were sure that he wasn't in any more danger, they quickly left his apartment, leaving him alone. What now? Should I just wait until the hallucination effect is over? What's the fun in that? I want to explore. In truth, Michael was a bit hesitant to go out. If he went out and saw the real world, a part of him would think that he wouldn't be able to return to the royal continent. But the old man's words assured him that that wouldn't happen. Nothing here was real. He walked up to the door and slowly made his way outside. As soon as he stepped out, the sounds of honking cars and shouting pedestrians immediately rang out in his ears. I guess some things don't change. When he was first reborn, he thought the world of the royal continent was crude and basic. After all, they had no advancement in technology whatsoever. But after seeing the real world again, he was changing his mind. The nation of Reborn was definitely much more refined than this place. There was no trash littered around in the streets, no rats sneaking around in the sewers, and definitely no drunk guy sleeping on the floor. Just then, he suddenly felt a vibration in his pocket. BZZT, BZZT. He took out the phone from his pocket and saw a myriad of missed messages written inside. You're not coming on your shift. We're swamped over here. Can you come? The manager asks if you can take an extra shift. It had been so long that he had completely forgotten his job in the first place. Of course, he ignored the text messages. He wasn't going to spend his day here hunched over in a cubicle. Just then, he heard screams on the other side of the street. It wasn't screams of terror. It was excitement. He saw people rushing through the streets, holding up their phones and a piece of paper for someone to write a signature with. He went up on his toes, peering through the crowd to see which celebrity it was that graced the streets with their presence. Unfortunately, there were too many people for him to take a good look. He walked closer, eventually finding himself at the edge of the crowd. And finally, he saw her. Hair as black as the night, skin as flawless as a pearl, eyes shining like a star, and lips as luscious as a cherry. It was Yuna Kim. She was currently signing vinyl albums and taking selfies with her fans. Despite being overwhelmed with literally 1,000 people screaming at her face, wanting to get her attention, she managed to keep her composure and smile at everyone she met. Yuna, if it was before his reincarnation, he would have just been satisfied with standing by the sidelines and observing her from afar. But now, he wanted to go up and greet her like an old friend. It had been so long since they'd seen each other back in the royal continent. Unfortunately, there were hundreds of other people who seemed to feel the same way. They were desperate to get her attention, and he wouldn't be able to squeeze his way through. It didn't matter anyway. She wasn't the Yuna that he'd been acquainted with all these years. He slowly started walking away. But then, he suddenly heard a change in the environment. Instead of excited screamings, there were now just murmurs and silent snapshots from cameras, wanting to capture this moment. He turned around and saw Yuna standing right in front of him. He almost couldn't see her from all the camera flashes that were simultaneously going off at the same time. He would certainly find his face in tabloids and newspaper articles the day after this. Yuna Kim looked at him, her eyes seemingly confused. She was trying hard to understand where or how she recognized him. Then, at the same moment that a camera flashed behind her, she realized it. Michael. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.